I have a very significant piece of legislation, S-965, called the Iran Sanctions Implementation Act. I spent a long time on the floor yesterday talking about this, and it occurred to me that it's a little bit complicated, and the longer you talk about it, the more complicated it gets. And so I've shortened it. Let me just make a couple of brief comments about where we are today in relationship to Iran and to some of the other countries in the Middle East, and a solution that everyone can agree to the problem that's there. First of all, 70% of Iran's revenues come from their export of oils. What we have done successfully is had some modest means of reducing that, so that we've actually cut their amount of exports in half over the last 4 or 5 years, from 202.5 million barrels of oil a day to 1.25 million barrels a day. Well, that amounts to 70% of the resources, the revenue that Iran has. Now, what do they do with their revenue? First of all, we recognize something that people don't like to talk about, and that is that Iran, our own intelligence says, and has said since 2007, that by 2015 they will have a weapon and a delivery system for that weapon. Our concern, of course, is one of the things that happened in Barack Obama's, the president's first budget 4 years ago, was, in addition to other things to the military, they did away with the ground-based interceptor in Poland, which was designed specifically to take care of a missile coming from the east. And of course, what we had in mind was the threat that's there from Iran. So that is a threat. The second thing they have, besides their nuclear buildup, is the fact that they are helping all the terrorist operations throughout the Middle East. I think we know that they were very significant in assisting Assad in his barbaric slaughter of over 70,000 of the Syrian people. They're able to do this because Iran earns $3 billion a month in oil revenue. That's 70% of their revenue. Now, if Iran didn't have access to this money, its ability to influence the region would be either stopped or significantly curtailed. In other words, Iran cannot pose this threat without their oil revenues. Now, the United States production is now 7 million barrels a day, which is 40% higher. Put the chart up here. 40% higher than in 2008. Now, when you look at the map here, and you can see back in the old days, that was the oil belt was the western part of the United States. Look at it now; it's all changed. You have the Marcellus up there in Pennsylvania, which is now the second largest employer in Pennsylvania, and so it's scattered throughout. And the reason for this surge is because the use of horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing has allowed us to reach reserves, reach production we otherwise could not do it. Here's the interesting thing. We have grown by 40% in our production, all 100% of it on state or private land, none of it on federal land. In fact, during this boom that we're in the middle of right now, that's so productive to the economy of most of the states now, none of that came from the federal government. In fact, we had a reduction during this time in the production from federal lands. So the Institute for Energy Research recently issued a report stating that if we enacted policies that allowed aggressive development of all this off-limit land that's there right now, it would generate $14 trillion in economic activity, create 2.5 million jobs, and reduce the deficit by 2.7. But most of all, we could become totally independent from having to import our energy from any other country. Now, what this bill does is says that if the president, put the one up with the circles on it, if the president would, at his discretion, it would require that the president find some area where you can just increase our production from federal lands by 1.25 million barrels a day. That's just a small, minuscule part of all the production that could be there. For example, in just this area here, that would exceed 1.25 million barrels a day. Or this up here in Alaska, or even offshore. The senator from Virginia, who's going to be speaking next, is one, they've actually voted to go ahead and explore this off their shores. Any of these places would do that. Once they come up, and why do we say 1.25 million barrels a day? That's what Iran exports. All right, this is what would happen. They would, if we were able to do that, that would be 1.25 million barrels a day that we in the United States would no longer have to import, which would open that up to those who are are importing from Iran, and we completely dry up this 70% of their revenue. And of course, the rewards of that would be great for our country. So you're looking at one of these rare situations where everything's good. Everything that would come from this is beneficial. We could dry up their revenues that they're using right now to enhance their nuclear capability and to perform all these atrocious acts in the Middle East. And at the same time, we would be able to lessen our dependence and provide all of the benefits that come from the use of this. Eventually, we would like to be in a situation where we could do not just 1.25 million barrels a day, but maybe 10 times that and become totally independent. In the meantime, we're only talking about one very small amount that we would be telling the President of the United States that he's going to have to allow us to explore it so that we can stop Iran from doing the things that they are doing today.